to the demo of some of the challenges we face in red team hacking today. The first tool we're going to look at is AFD. AFD will detect IPSs. So as you see here, we're in Fedora Core 12. So I've actually got a different box than Kali Linux because AFD is not in Kali Linux. And so if I do an ls, this is actually the directory. I like this thing that says complexexample.sh, or .sh, so it's a shell script. So we more it, and now this shows us how to use it. So as you look here, we have Ostem AFD-P, HTTP, that's the protocol I'd imagine, timeout, and then how to do it. It shows us actually how to set it up and do it. So now what we're going to do is, we're going to tip this against my good friend Joe McRae's website. Since he likes to use his own website, learnsecurityonline.com, we'll use it too. And now he goes, he's doing all these checks. AFD is looking to see if there's any active filtering in place. And it's clean. No active filter in place. So we go try another site. Let's try Microsoft. And all we're checking for is HTTP. We're not checking for any other protocols, but it's the same concept if you check for other protocols. As you see, no active filtering detected there. A lot of people don't filter HTTP. Why? It's an intrusion prevention system. If you filter HTTP, guess what happens? You block access to your websites. That's usually not an administrator's idea. We'll try one more, and then we'll move on. And we'll try my good friend Clement Dupuy's site. And again, since it's HTTP, usually people don't filter HTTP. As we see, no active filtering detected. But this is how you would actually look for IPSs. In this case, we're lucky, we haven't found any. So what we do now is we go over to our next test. And our next test is going to be load balancing. For load balancing, we use a tool called LBD. As you see, I've switched over to Kali Linux. So if I do an LBD, load balancing, let's go back to Joe McRae again. First it checks DNS load balancing, not found. Smaller sites usually won't load balance. HTTP load balancing. Does not use load balancing, okay? Now let's go to somebody who probably does use load balancing. Let's do, clear the screen so it gets bigger for us. Up at the top, moving the view and zooming in a little bit for you. And let's do LBD. Microsoft. Using IIS 8. See that? Load balancing does exist. So what's it mean for our testing? You might be on one IP testing it, and the next time you go do your test another day or 2 days later, you're on a different IP. Why? Because it does use load balancing. So this is the technique we use. Okay, now what we want to do next is we're going to go to an actual web page that is a form, and we're going to test SQL injection. So if I open a web page, This is a form for us. Our traditional way SQL injection is single quote or 1 equals 1 dash dash. If I submit this, bang, I get blocked. Why? Because of this. So I just set up a default trial version of Profense. So as you see, Profense Web Application Firewall is blocking this site. Now, if I go to the actual site itself, because I know that information, and I do a single quote or 1 equals 1, now I get the entire database because I went directly to the site. But again, that's because I have the information. But what I do is, if I go back here and go again, 66, now I'm back going through the virtual proxy, which is how most configurations are set up with a web application firewall. So now what I want to do is show you how to detect a web application firewall in case the administrator has obfuscated that banner. So we go back to our Kali Linux, and we'll do WAF woof. Before we do that, we'll do forward. This is WAF woof. No WAF detected. What about Microsoft? Make sure I spell it right. Behind a web application firewall. So again, this is where we start learning about how these challenges can present challenges to us, and we got to think a little bit differently. Well, what about if we go back to our friendly neighborhood 166 machine? Not only does it tell me it's behind a web application firewall, it knows it's Profense because, again, we just set up a default installation so you could see it. So now you have an idea on how web application firewalls can be detected. Now, remember, obfuscation, different techniques will get through this. What you have to do is lab it up and then work on it. Unfortunately, if you try to do Profense, Profense Armor Logic, the company that makes it, is no longer accessible. So therefore, you can't lab up Profense. Now, if I go back, I want to show you the actual Profense box itself. This is the Profense trial version. As I said, it's no longer available, but it is an excellent web application firewall. So if I click on this, timed out because I waited too long, this shows me the blocks. So there it tells me it was SQL injection attempts, and it blocked it because it's in block mode. This is how Profense works. So one last thing I'll show you on this, and then we'll wrap up, is Profense itself. This is the Profense firewall. What I love about it is, watch this, ls, doesn't work. What about ifconfig? Doesn't work. What do? You go read the manual. Unfortunately, maybe you can find it at archive.org, the Wayback Machine, but more than likely it'd be hard to find the manual. So if you don't know how to use the manual and how to use this, you're not going to do anything inside Profense. Why? Because it's OpenBSD. But it's a version of OpenBSD that's been stripped down and hardened specifically for a web application firewall. In fact, from the defense side, it's one of my favorite web application firewalls. Unfortunately, it got bought out, but I still have copies of it, which is good. The other thing about it is, most of us consider OpenBSD to be the most secure operating system in the world, or at least one of them, and this is a hardened version of that, which makes it very powerful. Now, because I have used it for years, I know how to get through it. Do your research, lab it up, and you will too. This concludes Red Team Hacking Additional Considerations demonstration.